Koutou tamariki maha. Time for the Silver Sword, Chapter 7, Winter and Summer Homes. Well done to everyone who revisited their research work. Really a good job on improving that. Big shout out to Xavier, Madison, Townsend and Darcy, who have put your research work up on our class blog. So if you're looking for some quality pieces of work to model yours after, there's 3 bits on there that you can go and have a look at. Well done to everybody who revisited and improved their work. So keep that up. If you're still working on that kapai, I look forward to seeing it. When we last left the Beliski children, they had just escaped from the Nazis over the roofs as their house was blown up. So we start Chapter 7, Winter and Summer Homes. They made their new home in a cellar at the other end of the city. They had tunnelled their way into it. From the street it looked like a rabbit burrow in the middle of rubble, with part of the wall rising behind. On the far side there was a hole in the lower part of the wall, and this let in the light and air as well as rain. When they asked the Polish Council of Protection about their mother, they were told she'd been taken off to Germany to work on the land. Nobody could say which part of Germany. Though they went many times to ask, they never found out more. The war will end soon, they were told. Be patient, your mother will come back. But the war dragged on, and their patience was to be surely tried. They quickly made their new home as comfortable as they could. Eric, who could climb like a monkey, scaled 3 stories of a bombed building to fetch a mattress and some curtains. The mattress he gave to Ruth and Bronia. The curtains made good sheets. On wet days they could be used over the hole in the wall to keep the rain out. With floorboards he made 2 beds, chairs and a table. With bricks from the rubble he built a wall to divide the cellar into 2 rooms, one to live in and one to sleep in. He stole blankets from the Nazi supply dump, 1 for each of them. Here they lived for the rest of that winter and the following spring. Food was not easy to find. Ruth and Bronia had green Polish ration cards and were allowed to draw the small rations that the Nazis allowed. But, except when Eric found casual work, they had no money to buy food. Eric had no ration card. He had not dared to apply for one, as that would have meant disclosing his age. Everyone over 12 had to register, and he would most certainly have been carried off to Germany as a slave worker. Whenever possible, they ate at the soup kitchens, which Polish welfare had set up. Sometimes they begged at the nearby convent. Sometimes they stole from the Nazis or scrounged from their garbage bins. They saw nothing wrong in stealing from their enemies, but they were careful never to steal from their own people. War had made Eric sharp and self-reliant for his years. Ruth was slower to adapt herself to the new life. At first, during the long, drawn-out winter and the biting winds of early spring, it seemed as if she was too young to take on responsibility. But she learned gradually. She saw that Eric was always cheerful because he was always busy. She knew she must get out of the habit of leaving all the practical details to him. One thing she could do was to make Bronia less miserable. She remembered that Bronia had always loved drawing. Ever since her little fist had been able to hold a pencil, she had delighted her father with her scribbles. So Ruth encouraged her to go on drawing now. They had no pencils or paper, but they had the cellar walls and plenty of charred wood, which to make charcoal. Bronia drew what she saw. Soon the walls were covered with pictures of people queuing outside the soup kitchens and of children playing hide-and-seek amongst the ruins. Then Ruth started a school. She invited other lost children of Bronia's age and a little older. While Eric was out at work or finding food, she told them stories in the cellar. When she ran out of stories, the others took their turn. She made them speak out clearly without mumbling. One day at the soup kitchen, she talked about her school. Next time she went, she was given slates and chalk and a pocket Bible. News of these presents spread like fire, and soon she had a mob of urchins outside the cellar window, begging to be allowed to join the school. But there was only room for 12, and very reluctantly she had to turn them away. Ruth was a born teacher. She could hold the children spellbound for as long as she liked. She varied the work as much as possible, giving the mornings to lessons and the afternoons to play. The day started with a Bible story. She read it herself with the children round her, 3 to a blanket if it was cold. Next came reading and writing, followed by a break in the open air. Up they shot from the rabbits' warrens, into the sunlight. They ran down the street to the wooden fence that they called the Riviera. Here they would sit in a long line, pressing their backs to the sun-drenched wood, soaking up the warmth until their bodies were glowing all over. On sunless days, they played a brisk game before returning to the cellar for another story. They liked the stories of the Old Testament best. Their favourite was always Daniel in the lion's den. They enjoyed it just as a story, but for Ruth it had a deeper meaning. She thought of it as the story of her own troubles. The lions were the cold and the hunger and the hardships of their life. If only they were patient and trustful like Daniel, they would be delivered from them. She remembered a picture of Daniel that her mother had once given her. He was standing in the dungeon, with his hands chained behind him and his face lifted upwards towards a small barred window high above his head. He was smiling and did not notice the lions that prowled around his feet, powerless to touch him. At night she liked to fall asleep with this picture in her mind. She could not always see it clearly. Sometimes Daniel's face was clouded, and the light from the window fell upon the lions. They were scowling and snarling, and they filled her dreams with terror. In the early morning they left the city and went to live in the woods outside. Start again. In the early summer they left the city and went to live in the woods outside. It was cold at night out in the open, but they slept huddled together in the blankets under an oak tree, which Eric had chosen for the shelter of his branches. There was not much rain that summer, though they had 1 or 2 drenchings in May. After that, Eric cut down some branches, lashed them together to make a lean-to. This was thick enough to keep out all but the heaviest rain. Life was much healthier here than in the city. The sun browned their limbs. There were plenty of other families to play with, some of them Jews that had escaped from the Warsaw Ghetto. They could run about freely and hold their classes under the trees without having to keep a lookout for police patrols. Sometimes Ruth had as many as 25 in her school. She would have taken more, but they had no paper, very few slates, and no books at all. Occasionally they received a smuggled copy of the secret journal, specially published for children by the Polish underground press. It was called Biedronka, the Ladybird, and was full of the kind of stories and pictures and jokes that children enjoy. The grubby finger marks showed that other families had seen it before them. When Ruth's children had finished with it, there was nothing left but a few tattered strips. Because of the kindness of the peasants, food was more plentiful. Though they were forbidden to store food or sell it to anyone but the Nazis, they gave the children whatever they could spare. They hid it too, in cellars and haystacks and holes in the ground. With the help of the older children, they smuggled into towns and sold it to the Poles on the black market. Eric was one of the chief smugglers. In return for his services, he was given all the food he needed for the family. One of his dodges was to go off to town with pats of butter sewn into the lining of his coat. But he could only do this on cool days or at night. On hot days the butter melted. So he preferred to work at night if he could. In time the Germans became wary and posted patrols on all the main roads into the city. After that he cut cross-country, using the paths and rough tracks. He was well aware of the penalties if he was caught. A younger child might get away with a beating, but boys as strong as he was would be carried off to Germany, for the Nazis were getting short of labour at home. Another of Edic's dodges was the cartload of logs which he drove to the suburbs. Some of the logs were split, their centres scraped out and packed with butter and eggs, then glued together again. Once he drove his cartload into a police patrol, which was searching everywhere on the road. They emptied the logs on the pavement. Edic didn't stay to see if the glue would stand up to the treatment. He dived into the crowd and made off. Police whistles were blowing, and the chase had started, when some kind friend lifted him up and pitched him headfirst into a garbage cart. Here he lay hidden, under cinders and dust and rotting vegetables. After that, Edic did all his smuggling at night. There came a morning, towards the end of August, when he failed to return. Ruth questioned the other families in the forest, but no one had seen him. After some days of searching, she traced him to a village 10 miles away. Edic had called at a house where the secret police were searching for hidden stores. They had found cheese sewn into the lining of his coat. After setting fire to the house, they had taken him away in the van, with the house owner as well. Ruth returned to the forest with a heavy heart, dreading to break the news to Bronia. Edic had been their lifeline, food, clothes, money. They depended on him for all of these. In the city, he had made a home out of a ruin. In the woods, no tree had given better shelter than the oak he had chosen. And after dark, when the wind blew cold and the damp oozed out of the ground, no one knew better than he how to keep the fire unattended till dawn, so that the glow from the embers should warm them all night as they slept. Now Ruth and Bronia must fend for themselves. It was an ordeal before which the bravest spirit might quail. Okay, 5 questions today and then a bit of a writing or a description activity to do. So your questions: what happened to the children's mother? How do they know? Where did the children get food to eat? Why did the children move to live in the woods in the summer? Why was it of benefit for Edic to smuggle food to the Polish? And then describe how Edic was caught by the Nazis. What do you think will happen to Edic now he's been caught? Describe what you think will happen and draw a picture of him. Obviously, I don't want you to use the template that's on the page. You won't be able to fit it in there. So, on a slide by itself, do a description on one side, and then on the other side, put your picture of what you think will happen to Edic now he's been caught. Looking forward to seeing them. Looking for some great quality Year 7-8 work that I can put on the blog. Keep up the great work. Looking forward to hearing from you. Have a great Thursday.